happy podcast day for Pack Jones and Associates. Jordan has brought us a special guest today.
I am. This is my dad, you guys. Say hi to Daryl. Daryl, say hi.
Hello.
Yep. Daryl is a real estate appraiser. He's been in the business for over 30 years, I believe. But do you want to give us a little introduction, Dad, and tell us a little bit about your experience and how long you've been doing it and all that?
I've been appraising for a little over 30 years. Certified residential appraiser. Got a lot of information about me on my website, darrellclark.com. One L in Darrell, D-A-R-R-E-L, Clark.com. A lot of frequently asked questions there if you want it. Tell some information about the appraisal industry. So I do work for banks, individuals, whoever needs residential appraisers. I've been doing work from small condominiums, little manufactured homes, up to properties over 20 million. So
yeah.
I do it all.
That's crazy. And you do Park City, Salt Lake Valley, Utah County, all of the above?
Yes, mostly Utah County, but I do Park City and South Salt Lake County, yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, we drew up some questions for you, so we're really going to grill you here. It's I hope you're prepared. Or not.
Okay, let's get into it.
All right. So my first question, how do you value, so these are going to be kind of all over the place. I was thinking of them while I was real scatterbrained. But when we're talking about one house has, let's say 180-degree views, valley views, or mountain views, just really spectacular views. But say the house across the street does not. It has obstructed views. How do you go about valuing those?
That's sort of a tough one. There's a couple of ways you can do that. If it's in a newer subdivision, I look at lot sales. That's an obvious way.
Yeah.
How much did the lot with the view sell for versus the one without the view?
Oh, yeah.
And that's an easy way. And then if it's an older property, a lot of times you can find homes that were similar and do like what they call paired sales and find out, well, this home without the view sold for this much, and it was real similar to the one that you're looking at. And here's one with a great view, and it sold for this, and you can compare them. And if all else fails, I talk to realtors who do a lot of work in the area and say, what have you seen? Because maybe realtors that have sold properties in that area for 10, 15 years, they might have a good feel for it. So 3 options.
Okay.
You'll actually hit up the realtors and question them a little bit when you're looking for comps.
Yeah, if that's sometimes I do that. If there's no other quantitative way to do it, then I can talk to realtors that have experience, and they say, well, this is what we've seen over the last 10, 20 years that we've been in the business, and that helps.
That's awesome. I'm only a little bit offended that no appraiser has ever reached out to me to ask me value questions, but whatever. That's cool. All right. Then one of the other ones I run into a lot is, what adjustments do you make if a home is on a busy road? So like we see listings on 700 East here, which is tens of thousands of cars daily going by. But I always the rough idea I've been giving my buyers and sellers is, if a house is directly on a busy street, plan on it being like 7 to 10% lower priced than a house that's 2 blocks off of that busy street for almost the exact same house. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I think you're probably pretty much on track.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, generally the homes on the busy streets like that are homes that are in fully developed subdivisions, and you can't have lot sales to compare them. So what do? You just sort of talk to real estate agents and say, what have you seen? And they generally have a really good feel for that because they work in that market every single day.
For sure. Joel, I know you had some questions.
Oh, yeah. So when I first started getting into the game, we've got an appraisal deadline coming up, and they say, okay, when your appraiser comes over, leave him a note. And say, this was back when we were getting like 10 offers on every house. And it's like, and things were coming the appraisals were coming in low, and people were paying cash over appraisal and everything. So we were just trying to get things to appraise for as close as possible. And I always felt a little bit like, am I stepping on their toes by leaving a note saying, I think if we got 10 offers on a place versus, this is the first offer we've had in 3 months, that's a different thing. But sometimes I felt like, are we stepping on their toes by writing a letter and saying, hey, here are the comps we use to price the place, or what things do you? So I guess do you see notes from real estate agents? How often? What makes a good note versus a bad note left by a real estate agent?
personally, I like as much information as I can get.
Cool.
So if I am doing a property that's sold and the listing agent or the sales agent says, here's some comparable properties that I think support the value, I'm happy to look at them.
Cool.
And if they fit and if they're some of the best ones, I may use them. If I think that there's better comparable properties, then I'll, of course, use different ones. And as far as letters from realtors, the only things I don't really like are what they call love letters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are dangerous.
You get those, Dad?
Once in a while. Once in a while, you know.
Here's a plate of cookies in our comps we used.
You know,
Yeah.
or
Also,
you,
we
or,
need
in
to
an envelope of
appraise
cash.
or more like this buyer really loves the property and this buyer needs this house because, you know, that kind of
Non-factual things.
those
that-
non-factual
yeah.
things. Yeah. If they give me factual information, I love it.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're not stepping on my toes or any appraiser's toes by giving them information. The more information, the better, I always say.
Okay, I like that approach. I've only one time had an appraiser come back to me that got a little bit of an attitude about it, and
I did
it was
too.
almost like, "What do you think I don't know how to do my job?"
Yeah, that was me. That was me too. And I was like, oh, I didn't.
There's
mean
only
that.
one though. Most have been
Yeah.
super cool.
I think if an appraiser comes back and says that, he's probably insecure
Yeah.
because more information is always better, isn't it?
You would think so. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
Other thing. So I have kind of a. I don't want to say a general spiel, but kind of a general spiel that I give my buyers and sellers when they're asked when the appraisal deadline's coming up. The appraisal's been ordered, and this is typically the time during the process where emotions start getting a little bit heightened, and people are worried. Like, okay, well, we've agreed on the stuff. Now what's next? And I talk. So is it going to appraise low? What happens if it appraise high? Do we have to pay more? You know, like, and they start thinking. And I have a spiel where I kind of say, hey, look. Appraisers, since 2008 especially, things have been different where appraisers can get in some trouble if they just arbitrarily appraise things too high. However, they do have, from what I understand, the purchase contract in front of them, so they see a number and I say it's their job to see if the bank can if this home can reasonably appraise for this value. And so there's something to shoot for. Now they're going to get in trouble if they're just always putting stuff above just to get that thing. But at the same time, it's not in their best interest to appraise everything low just for the sake of it. And if they think it's worth a lot more than you're paying for it, I don't know how much, I guess there's probably a window there. You've got something to shoot for. If something's under contract and you've got a number to shoot for, that's another piece of information. If people are getting an appraisal before it's been under contract, can you maybe just explain the difference of whether you're doing an appraisal for something that's under contract for something that's not under contract? Am I making any sense? Am I kind of dancing around the subject?
Yeah, sure. I do appraisals for pre-listings quite often, and then of course there's no contract, so there's no target to shoot at. And then I do a lot for lenders who have a contract, and according to the uniform standards of appraisal practice, the lender has to give me a copy of the contract if it's under contract, and I review that, and the terms are reviewed within the appraisal report. And if it can be reasonably justified, then yeah, for example, if a home, say, sells for $600,000, and I would do all the data, and my appraisal might suggest like $590 or something, I would probably make the difference and say, yeah, 600. It's going to be there. So
You can find something in there that's
if it's close, I'm not going to maybe kill a deal for like $5,000, for example.
something that it will make up in value
Yeah,
in the next 2 months.
Yeah, because an appraisal to begin with, if you're within 5%, you're probably pretty accurate on an appraisal. We try to be as accurate as possible, but realistically, if you're within 5%, I think you're pretty darn good.
Well, and the reason a bank is requiring an appraisal is to make sure that they're not underwater on an asset, right? So say somebody purchases a house, doesn't make a payment for the first 6 months, and they have to foreclose right away. They want to make sure they can make their money back. So what you're saying makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I even come in higher than what the contract price is.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because I can look at the listing and I see maybe it listed for a higher price and they accepted a lot lower offer, and maybe there were some circumstances there that would suggest that that's appropriate. So it's quite often not unusual that I would come in higher than the contract price in situations like that. So anyway.
Okay. Good to know. But yeah, I mean, like I have one under contract right now that appraised a bit above our contract price. But like an appraiser doesn't have any reason to say, oh yeah, it's worth 80,000. It's not 80,000 over. Sadly, my buyer would be psyched. But
Right.
there's no real reason for you to say like, oh yeah, it's worth 80,000 more, or yeah, there's no real motivation to do that for you. There's no benefit to you.
And we have guidelines that we have to follow. There has to be comparable properties, and you have to make adjustments to the comparable properties that are substantiated. You have to have, why did you make this adjustment? And within the report, there should be the data that says, this is why I made this report, substantiates it. And so it's all pretty factual. There's not too much subjective in one of those.
The idea is to stay as objective as possible.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it is as subjective as possible as well.
Yeah.
It's like it's like part art and part science, where you're using
More
data
science.
where you're using data to come up with everything, and then also saying, okay, like, do I go geographically further out to get a more comparable home, or do I go further back days on market to to find something closer geographically, and you have to make those kind of calls.
That's sort of the art of it, trying to find the best comparable properties. That's really the key to getting a good value. If you can get comparable properties that are as similar as possible, similar market, location of course is most important, and then quality and size and all those things follow.
Yeah.
But finding good comparable properties is the real art, especially for, well, not only appraisers, but realtors when they're telling the buyers or sellers, this is what you should price your home at.
For sure.
We just went through that, you and I.
Yeah, and it's real important. Like, realtors need to realize, too, that there's difference. Not all square footage is the same. Like, basement square footage is not the same as main
That was
level.
one of the questions.
Literally brings me to a question, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
You were helping me price a home for a seller recently. I sent you some comps, and then you went through and helped find some better ones, more because you're more of the artist. You've been doing this a long time. When I sent you a bunch of comps, I just had total square footage. But then when you went back and helped me to pick out better comps, you made sure to talk about above grade square footage compared to below grade. What did you call that on
Is it GLA?
Right.
Gross
Right.
living
Yeah.
area.
A lot of times I refer to it as gross living area. So, of course, basement area, even if it's finished, is not the same as above grade living area as far as value. It costs a lot less to build, and buyers don't pay as much for basement area as they do above grade. And that also goes for the difference between a 2-story and a 1-story. It's a lot cheaper to build, say, 3,000 square feet in a 2-story than it is 3,000 square feet in a 1-story.
Yeah.
And buyers look at that the same way as the cost. So it's important to compare 1-stories or ranch styles to ranch styles, and 2-stories to 2-stories, and ones with finished basements to finished basements. That's real important.
Interesting. Now, when we're talking above grade square footage, sometimes it can get a little ambiguous, right? So say you have a split level home, but the bottom level is only maybe 1 foot below grade. Do you still count that as below grade square footage?
That's sort of an interesting question. We're supposed to follow what they call the ANSI standards, is what appraisers follow. And if it's 1 foot below grade, it's supposed to be basement area.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is comparing apples to apples. If we have maybe a property, like you said, that's got the lower levels that's a foot below grade, if we can find other comparable properties that maybe the bottom level is 1 to 3 feet below grade like that, we'll compare them. And so that's what's important, comparing apples to apples.
Yeah. And what's about the furthest out geographically you will go? I'm sure it varies by area because you just want to find areas of similar character and everything. But typically, what's about the furthest out you try to keep it? Do you try to keep it within like a 1 mile radius or a 2 mile radius?
That all depends. And that's the
There's
answer.
the art.
It depends, because if I'm appraising a home in a rural area, then I might go 5 to even 10 miles. If I'm doing it like in a city, it might be within 10 blocks.
Okay.
So it's all relative, and so it all depends.
Interesting. Okay. That's awesome. This is great. This is my new favorite.
Yes.
We should have guests more often.
Yeah, can we just have a hotline for you? Perfect. And then one of the questions was, when you see an updated home versus a non-updated home. So say, like, my home was built in 1977. When I bought it, it had clearly been upgraded in, like, 2004 or something. Lots of travertine. Travertine everywhere. But we've gone through and renovated it so it's more up to modern standards. If you're looking at my home and then say there's almost the exact same floor plan, exact same model, same square footage, but theirs isn't updated, how, once again, I know this is going to be conditional,
Yeah.
but is there kind of a general guideline you use when comparing those two?
Sort of. I guess what I look at is effective age and quality. That's the two things.
Yeah.
So if it's updated, first of all, I would look at, well, what does it look like the age of the property is? So I might have a home that's, say, 30 years old, but it's been all updated, and it looks like it's 2 years old. So I would say the effective age is 2 years, and I would try to find comparable properties that also look like they're 2 years old.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then the second thing is quality. You know, is it really done with good quality? Are they all solid surface countertops, maybe high-end appliances? Bathroom's been all updated. Then I want to find a property that has similar quality. So that's how you do that. It's
Okay.
Again, it's all choosing the comparable
So
properties.
you would rather choose a comp or the comp with a higher weight that was, say, built in like 1990 with similar finishes versus the other house that was also 1977 that's like, but
Yes,
not
if-
updated at all.
If I could, a lot of times lenders especially require appraisers to try to, what they say, bracket the comparable properties. So you want something that's older than the subject, something that's newer than the subject, something that's bigger than the subject, something that's older, you know, just to bracket
the
everything.
Goldilocks approach.
Yeah,
It's
to
just
bracket
right.
everything if you can. Bracket all the features that are important. So if I have to use, say, like in your example, a home that was the similar age that hadn't been updated, then I would, through the experience that I have looking at construction costs, I would say, okay, it looks like you spent $25,000 updating this home. So I'm going to take the older home that was, say, built in 1970 and adjust it up $25,000.
So that's where letters from agents can be helpful. So like,
Yes.
once again with mine, if I were to say I put X amount of dollars into it, into upgrading it, you would take that into consideration.
Yeah, especially if you could document it and say, well, I spent this much for the bathroom and I spent this much for appliances and so forth.
Oh.
Then if I have that, and I can put that in my file.
Yeah. So getting that granular won't drive you nuts and make you hate us.
No, that's wonderful. Appraisers are required to maintain work files besides just what they send. What you guys see, we have a work file that we have to maintain, and that would go in my work file.
Oh,
and it's by regulations that I have to maintain that.
Okay. That's awesome. That's really good to know. I'm going to, yeah. I mean, we always write letters for appraisers. We try to justify value. I usually try and find at least 2 or 3 ways that I justify value. Like, hey, here's what the appreciation has been in this area. Here are the comps we used, and here's the traffic we got.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that
But
would
I'm
all
going
go.
to start including that, though.
Yeah.
The
Updates.
sellers updated this 3 years ago and spent $40,000 on the kitchen.
Oh yeah, for sure. If everything would go in our work file, and the pertinent parts would go in the report.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, for sure, that helps.
And then,
I was wondering when you're comparing updates. Let's say a house that was built in the 70s, you know, and it's all updated, but let's say one house was updated with like great quality cabinets and stuff like that. How do you tell that it's great quality work as opposed to somebody who just bought something from IKEA and threw it in? Like, how do when you're doing these comparable sales, how do you know?
A lot of times you can tell by looking at them, and a lot of times when the realtors list the properties that I use for comparable sales, they're going to sort of try to sell it, and they'll say, well, this property that I have listed has this and this and this and this. So I'll read all the comments that the agents have, and a lot of times that's a real clue, plus the visual pictures that you have. So it all goes into it, and there can be a big difference. I mean, you can have a kitchen range that you buy for a couple $1,000s, and you can have a kitchen range that you spend $30,000 on.
A Thermador versus a Samsung.
Oh yeah, there's big differences, and as you work in the business for years and years, you learn those differences.
That's awesome. All right. Oh, you seem like you had a question.
Oh, is there kind of a range of the number of comps you try to shoot for? More than this, less than this? If you start getting into, I'm not going to use 20 comp, but I need more than one or two,
Generally, you're supposed to have at least 3. And if I can find 3 good comparable properties, I'll use only 3. I'd say, why give myself a lot more work than than I need? If there's 3 that bracket everything, that cover bracket the age, bracket the square footage, and a similar location, I'll use 3. Sometimes if I may need 4 or 5 to bracket everything, then I'll use a few more. But I try to use 3 to maybe 5, maybe 6 at the most.
Great, yeah.
Awesome. And then last question. What do you wish we as real estate agents or our buyers or sellers knew? What's the thing that drives you the craziest?
Oh, my goodness. That's a good question. That's a tough one. I really don't know.
Okay.
Other than just like we've been talking, the more information I can get, the better. And if they have a question, get with their real estate agent, and the real estate agent will get with me or the bank, and we'll address it.
Perfect. All right. I mean, it speaks to your character that you don't have a bunch of things that drive you nuts about real estate agents. You're just so nice.
No, I don't have any major problems.
Perfect. Well, I mean, do you guys have any other questions, or you're a busy man. I don't want to hold you up for too long.
Yeah, that helped me out a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. And Jordan, thanks for being born to him.
My pleasure. Did my best.
And thanks for having Jordan, because we think he's super cool. Yes.
Of course, I do too.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I hope this is helpful for everyone listening.
Don't get screwed over. Hire a professional.
That's it. Go team.